lineup. Today is March the 6th, 2025. I'm Barry Stagner. Very glad to have you with us this evening. And just a reminder, we have a new program launching. Amir and I teaming up together to talk about the Middle East and beyond. And the lineup is coming to a close here at some point in the near future. But I also want to remind you that we're going to start doing a little bit of doctrinal housekeeping updates. And I've titled the little segments Take Five. We're going to take 5 or so minutes and talk about some of the big things that people often wonder about. We'll go into a little more detail than simply just the answering questions on Q&A and the other wonderful things that we're privileged to do. But we're going to talk about one issue at a time, and we'll do it on Thursdays, and they'll air on Thursday night, just like the lineup. But if you're looking for opportunity to follow the news Tuesday mornings every week at 9 a.m. Pacific time, you can join Amir and I for Israel and beyond. And we're really excited about this program and looking forward to the launch in the next couple of weeks. We're going to do a little test drive on Monday, and it's possible that next Thursday will be the last of the lineup. And again, thank you all for joining in. And I really appreciate your support and the encouragement. And most of the comments online, not all are positive, but anyway, you got to take the good with the bad, so to speak. But we got another busy week in the news, and we'll talk about some of the things happening in Israel and then move out to the rest of the world. And the first story comes from the Jewish News Syndicate, one of my favorite news outlets. And it says Israel and the U.S. reject Egypt's Gaza plan while Hamas welcomes it. Israel and the United States have rejected an Egyptian plan for Gaza's reconstruction endorsed by an Arab League summit in Cairo on Tuesday, while the Hamas terrorist group welcomed the proposal. Well, that ought to tell you right there some of the problems with it. The Israeli Foreign Ministry sharply criticized the statement issued at the emergency summit of the Extraordinary Arab Summit. That's the name of the summit, the Extraordinary Arab Summit, accusing it of ignoring the realities on the ground following Hamas' brutal attack on October 7, 2023. The statement remains rooted in an outdated perspective, the ministry said, adding that it fails to mention Hamas' brutal terrorist attack, which resulted in thousands of Israeli deaths and hundreds of kidnappings. Israel also condemned the summit for its failure to denounce Hamas explicitly. For 77 years, Arab states have used Palestinians as pawns against Israel, condemning them to eternal refugee status, the statement read. Israel also referenced recent proposals that could offer Gazans a new future, including ideas promoted by the U.S. President Donald Trump. There is an opportunity for the Gazans to have a free choice based on their own free will, and this should be encouraged, the ministry stated. Instead, it accused Arab states of rejecting the opportunity outright while continuing to level baseless accusations against Israel. The White House said that Cairo's Gaza reconstruction plan does not address the current harsh realities on the ground. The current proposal does not address the reality that Gaza is uninhabitable and its residents cannot live there humanely when it's covered in rubble and unexploded bombs, said Brian Hughes, a spokesperson for the National Security Council. Hughes also reaffirmed Trump's stance on Gaza's future, stating, President Trump stands behind his vision to rebuild Gaza without Hamas. Despite the rejection of the plan, he emphasized that the United States remains open to continuing talks on the issue. Trump's proposal involves resettling Gaza residents during the enclave's reconstruction into a global economic hub. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised Trump's plan on Monday, calling it visionary and innovative in a message thanking the president for his support during the Gaza war. Hamas expressed support on Tuesday for the Egyptian plan, which would establish a committee to oversee rebuilding efforts and governance in the war-torn region. In a statement, the Palestinian terrorist group said, we welcome the Gaza reconstruction plan adopted in the summit's final statement and call for ensuring all necessary resources for its success. They also voiced their backing for the creation of a community support committee, which would oversee relief efforts, reconstruction, and governance in Gaza as outlined in the temporary administrative body proposed by the Arab League Summit in Cairo. And at the Cairo Summit, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres expressed strong support for the Arab led initiative, stating, I strongly endorse this plan. The UN stands ready to fully cooperate in this endeavor. And that, too, with their backing, ought to tell you that this is a problem. EU Council President Antonio Costa also praised the plan presented by Egypt and other Arab states, saying they give hope to millions of Palestinians in Gaza, the West Bank, and abroad that the terrible suffering we've all witnessed over the past year and a half may come to an end. And again, the EU President Antonio Guterres, the head of the UN, the Secretary General, made no mention of what Hamas has done to Israeli citizens who were just going about their own business on October 7th, 2023, when they were invaded by a large number of Hamas members who took the lives of many, many Israeli soldiers, but also just ordinary, everyday citizens. Some at a music festival enjoying the weekend, others just in their kibbutz, just living life, and their lives were taken. Many were carried off into captivity. And again, none of these things seems to matter to these particular groups because, again, it's the Israelis. To them, they're a blight on humanity. And, I think one of the things, and my wife and I were just talking about this yesterday, I don't think people understand what it feels like to be hated by most of the world. And for most of the world to want to see your group, so to speak, or people of your heritage eliminated from the surface of the earth. What a pressure that is on the Jewish people. And yet we know that God is for them. He has brought them back into the land. And, for all the naysayers out there, you need to take a read through Ezekiel 36 and see about this rebirth of the nation of Israel, the regathering of the Jews from all over the world. It's their land. God gave them that land, and he can do what he wants. This is his planet. And your opinion and mine means absolutely nothing when it comes to what the Bible says. And we don't have a right to issue an opinion on what's going on there as far as their being brought back into their national homeland, because God said in Ezekiel 36:21 and 22, I'm not doing this for the Jews' sake. I'm doing this for my name's sake and for the glory of my name. And the reason that this is important to recognize is because God gave them that land. And in the midst of all that he says there in Ezekiel 36, he says every day that the Jews were outside, and I'm paraphrasing, every day that the Jews were outside of their unconditionally, eternally covenanted homeland, my name was being profaned among the nations. And for the Jews to be outside their national homeland for nearly 2 millennia, profaned the name of the Lord. And that's why he brought them back. He brought them back for his name's sake. So listen, let me just put it where the rubber meets the road. If you stand against Israel today, you're standing against the glory of God and the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And that's a foolish position to take. So do we support everything Israel does, every decision they make, every action that they take part in? Of course not. We don't even do that with our own government. We have a right to our opinion, and to support the right to exist is where we ought to draw the line. The Palestinians, the quote unquote Palestinians, I should say, have zero right to that land. It is the land of the Jews. It was given to them by the great God of heaven. And that's the end of that story. And there shouldn't be any debate on that matter within the church. Now, the Times of Israel says Trump tells sick and twisted Hamas to free all the hostages now, or it's over for you. Well, U.S. President Donald Trump Wednesday issued a new ultimatum to Hamas, demanding that the terror group immediately release all remaining hostages or be destroyed. Shalom Hamas means hello and goodbye. You can choose, Trump wrote on Truth Social. Release all the hostages now, not later, and immediately return all of the dead bodies of the people you murdered, or it's over for you. Well, I think they realize it's over with them either way. Netanyahu has made it quite clear there will be no Hamas. at the end of this battle or war. And Trump's post was uploaded shortly after he met with a group of 8 released hostages in the Oval Office and amid an apparent impasse in negotiations between Israel and Hamas after the first phase of a fragile ceasefire ended on Saturday. We'll get them out, he told a group of 8 freed hostages, referring to the remaining still held in Gaza. You were our hope when we were there, and now you're their hope, one of the 8, Nama Levy, told him. The White House later released footage of part of the meeting and some of the released hostages speaking separately to camera. The full meeting reportedly lasted almost 30 minutes, and the released hostages reportedly detailed to the president the appalling circumstances of their captivity. And last month, after Hamas threatened not to release a batch of those hostages, citing Israeli violations of the agreement, Trump issued another similar ultimatum, demanding that all of them be released at noon the following Saturday. Hamas didn't agree to release all the hostages, but it did free the 3 that it was scheduled to let go. I'm sending everything Israel needs to finish the job. Not a single Hamas member will be safe if you don't do as I say, he warned on Wednesday. And Trump has advanced over $11 million in weapons sales to Israel since taking office, including a shipment of 2,000-pound bombs that the Biden administration withheld due to concerns they'd lead to civilian deaths in Gaza. This is your last warning for the leadership. Now is the time to leave Gaza while you still have a chance. He noted that he just met with the former hostages whose lives you have destroyed. Only sick and twisted people keep bodies, and you are sick and twisted. Also, to the people of Gaza, Trump said, a beautiful future awaits you, but not if you hold hostages. If you do, you are dead. Make a smart decision. Release the hostages now, or there will be hell to pay later, Trump added. They will get the job done. You've been sent by God to release them. You can really help. You have the power to do it, said Omer Shem Tov in footage after the meeting that was released to the public. You were our hope when we were there, and now you're their hope, said Naama Levy. Once you were elected, we heard that you want to do everything to make a deal as soon as possible, and you gave us hope. It's interesting to see the impact that one individual can make. And, I think this last address to Congress that was made and the exposure of the Democrats and how deep their hatred is for this man that they can't even applaud a young boy who was present there who is battling brain cancer, has been battling brain cancer, was made an honorary member of the CIA. His dream was to be in law enforcement. If you saw any pictures of him, he was dressed in full law enforcement uniform. And yet, when he was introduced, not one Democrat clapped or even acknowledged this brave young man who's fighting quite literally for his life, who was privileged to be at the presidential address to Congress. And, this is a sad state of affairs. And I couldn't help but think of the last verse, or last 2 in Romans chapter 1, where at the end of this moral digression that's recorded there and talking about the debauchery of humanity, sexual perversion that's rampant. And there's a warning that's given not only to those who do things that are prohibited in God's economy and from his word, but also those who approve of them. And, the things that we're watching happening in our world today, the wicked and perverse generation that we live in, ought to remind us that things are wrapping up. I believe we're going home very, very soon. And everything that we see happening in our world today is pointing to the lateness of the hour. And, Paul told the church at Thessaloniki, listen, we're not in the darkness. This day that's coming, the day of the Great Tribulation, is, first of all, we don't have an appointment with it. But secondly, it's not something that's going to take us by surprise. And while we don't know the day or the hour of the rapture, we can recognize the lateness of the hour. Jesus even said so in the Olivet Discourse in Matthew 24 and 25 and Luke 21, where we're told that it will be as it was in the days of Noah. You look back on the days of Noah, the earth was corrupt before God. I think we can check that box. The thoughts and intents of man's heart was only evil continually. We can check that box. The earth was filled with violence. We can check that box. It is as the Bible says it was going to be when the rapture occurs in the midst of that season. Now, we don't dare speculate or certainly set a date for the rapture of the church. We know, by the way, it's not on Rosh Hashanah, as many people like to propose every year, because that would limit it to just one day a year that the rapture could happen. We know that's not true. So, any moment, I like to do this at conferences, and I think maybe it'd be a good time to do it here in the lineup. And so I want to challenge you to do something just real quick. Just take a second. I want you just to blink your eyes one time with me. Just blink one time, one single time. And here's what I like about that. One of these times when we blink, in the much shorter duration of time, actually, is what the Bible seems to imply. One of those times when you blink and open your eyes, you're going to be looking at Jesus, and we'll be with the dead in Christ, meeting him in the air. And that's how fast this whole transition is going to take place. So all the signs are around us. So let's make sure we're keeping our eyes on the prize, and let's not get pushed around by culture or any of the trends that are happening, even within the church today. Some of the shameful things, the boycott, divest, and sanction movement that is promoted by many churches today, is shameful. And, we ought not to be involved in those things. We certainly ought not to approve of them, because those who do approve of them are guilty of them. And that's what Romans 1 in chapter or verse 31 and 32 tells us. This is actually a Department of Justice press release that I want to read to you next. And it says the U.S. Justice Department launches an investigation of University of California under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Basically, that Civil Rights Act forbids any type of behaviors that eliminate, anyone because of ethnicity or any other social construct, so to speak. Other things have been incorporated into it, but basically, it was the part of the civil rights movement to make sure that nobody could be discriminated against because of their skin color. And the LGBT or the alphabet crowd has incorporated their sexual preference, which is a choice, by the way, into this, which ought not to be involved or included in that, but nevertheless it is in the world we live in today. And the press release reads as follows. The Federal Task Force to Combat Anti-Semitism announced that the Justice Department has opened a civil pattern or practice investigation into the University of California under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The investigation will assess whether UC has engaged in a pattern of practice of discrimination based on race, religion, and national origin against its professors, staff, and other employees by allowing anti-Semitic hostile work environment to exist on its campuses. The Department of Justice will, and remember, this is a DOJ press release. This is not a news article. This is the government speaking. This Department of Justice will always defend Jewish Americans. Thank you for that. Protect civil rights and leverage our resources to eradicate institutional anti-Semitism in our nation's universities, said Attorney General Pamela Bondi. Our country has witnessed a disturbing rise of anti-Semitism at educational institutions in California and nationwide. An acting Associate Attorney General and Department of Justice Chief of Staff, Chad Mizell, said, the Department of Justice is committed to upholding Title VII of the Civil Rights Act and protecting Jewish Americans as we investigate this potential pattern of discrimination. Leading task force member and senior counsel to the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, Leo Terrell, said, following the October 7, 2023 Hamas terror attacks in Israel, there's been an outbreak of anti-Semitic incidents at leading institutions of higher education in America, including at my own alma mater at the UCLA campus of UC. The impact upon UC students have been the subject of UC, standing for the whole University of California system, the subject of considerable media attention and multiple federal investigations. Now, the article goes on, or the press release goes on to talk about other specifics, some of the things that have been going on. But here's one of the things I think that's important for us to point out. And, been a lot of talk about the Trump's plan to eliminate the educational oversight system in our country. And, this is really where the problem has started. And, 150 years ago or so, we started letting some of the European thinking start creeping into the U.S., and some of these pagan belief systems began to be incorporated into our uh, um, curriculum at the university level. You got these liberal professors, these communist professors who are indoctrinating our students. And that's why, we have, and I'm sure most of you, like me, know people personally who sent their child off, raised in church, loving Jesus, off to a university or college campus in this country, and they come home an atheist with even anti-American sentiments. So, the problem at the university level is nothing new, and it does need to be handled. And there is anti-Semitism and there's anti-Americanism being taught in our universities. And, my mind in thinking about all these things is going back to what Paul talked about in 2 Timothy chapter 3, where he mentioned that perilous times are coming in the last days. And at the tail end, and in verses 4 and 5, he started talking about the headstrong aspect of it, the stubbornness. And, it's kind of interesting because the word headstrong means to consume without a flame. In other words, it's all about the thinking, and the thinking will manifest itself in behaviors. And some of the behaviors will be, as he listed there in 2 Timothy 3, 1 to 5, that people will be traitors. And we do have that going on in our country. People are betraying our country. And listen, you know, loving your country is not Christian nationalism. It's none of the ridiculous things that people like to throw out. And, one of the things I think that people often forget is that, our Declaration of Independence makes quite clear that there is a creator and that all men have been endowed by the creator with certain liberties, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These are unalienable rights, and so our documents, our national documents, indicate that there is a God in heaven. And I think one of the things that people often forget is that there are also state constitutions, and not just our national constitution, but early on, state constitutions of even the colonies required that in order to serve in government or be a citizen, you had to be a born again believer in Jesus Christ. I mean, that's the language that was used there. So, to say, that we're not a Christian country, well, we may not be anymore, but we certainly started that way. After all, what was the purpose of the pilgrims coming here? They wanted to worship God without any type of influence of the government. They came here to worship him freely. And let me just throw this out there since we're on this route. You will not find the statement separation of church and state in any of our national documents. It's not in the Bill of Rights, not in the Constitution, not in the Declaration of Independence. That was a phrase written by a letter penned by Thomas Jefferson to the Anabaptist. And what the separation of church and state mentioned was in regards to is that we were going to follow the path of England and have a state church where everybody had to be a part of that particular system. And it was an assurance that the Anabaptists could practice their faith in Christ as they saw it, and that the government was not going to intrude upon that. And, that's what the First Amendment is all about. The Congress shall pass no law restricting the free exercise of religion, the press, and speech, and the other things associated with it. And we've gotten so far upside down that people have become extremist about any Christian wanting to see our country continue or return to, if you will, its heritage as a Christian nation. As a matter of fact, the first Chief Justice of the first Supreme Court, a man named John Jay, who was appointed by George Washington himself, said that we in this Christian nation are to choose and prefer Christians as our rulers. Not that he would ever say it, but could you imagine something like that coming out of the mouth of John Roberts today and the uprise that would create, or the upheaval, I should say, that would create? And again, just watching these things where we're seeing happening around the world, and much of it, or in our country, I should say, lays on the backs of the liberal professors that have indoctrinated our children. And we don't have educational centers anymore. We have indoctrination centers, and the people are starting to wake up to that fact, which they should have done a long time ago. But either way, thank the Lord that many people are waking up and standing against all this garbage that has been sown into the minds of our children. Now, here's another sad story, but it doesn't really surprise me based on who is mentioned in the story. And this comes from Israel 365. And the headline says Hamas propaganda wins documentary Oscar. On Sunday night, the movie No Other Land won the Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature. And a closer look reveals that this documentary is shameless propaganda put out by a blatantly anti Semitic Hollywood, which is absolutely nuts. The number of Jews in Hollywood is astronomical. I think most are a good portion, I would venture to say, a strong percentage of some of the most famous people that have ever come out of Hollywood were Jews. And yet here we've got this very entity now voting for Palestinian propaganda. And the movie tells the story of a young Palestinian activist named Basil Adra, who has been resisting the forced displacement of his people by Israel's military in Masafer Yatta near Hebron. He records the gradual destruction of his homeland, where Israeli soldiers are tearing down homes and evicting their inhabitants to enforce a court order maintaining that the area has been legally designated as a military firing zone. He befriends Yuval, a Jewish Israeli journalist, who helps him struggle. They form an unexpected bond, but the gap between their living conditions challenges their friendship. Hmm. Shit. The film has won several awards as a documentary and was included on Screen International's list of top documentaries of 2024. Now it's won an Academy Award. It was filmed over 4 years between 2019 and 23, wrapping up production days before Hamas launched its October 7th, 2023 terror attack on Israel that started the war in Gaza. While the film does mention rising Israeli settler attacks on the villages since October 7th, and the film's directors have also used their festival run to speak out against Israel's subsequent military campaign in Gaza, it does not mention the massacre carried out by Hamas and the Palestinian civilians. And this is exactly what's happening on our college campuses. Truth is inconvenient, and therefore it's unmentioned. And this Oscar win for the film No Other Country is a sad moment for the world of cinema. Instead of presenting the complexity of our reality, the filmmakers chose to echo the narratives that distort Israel's image in the world. And freedom of expression is an important value, but turning the slander of Israel into a tool for international promotion, if not creativity, is sabotage of the state of Israel. Now, the story obviously is meant to pull on the heartstrings of people, but the historical inaccuracies are what is so tragic about this, and some of the things that are presented, uh, as though it's fact. And it's sadly, we live in a culture. Well, I saw it on TV, so it has to be true, and people think that way and believe. And here, this is one of the most bizarre things um, that I think is a reality of our day. Who cares what a movie star thinks politically? Just vote for whoever you want to, and your opinion means nothing as far as influencing somebody else's opinion. That's who you like, then great. But cast your vote, keep your mouth shut, and we don't care what you think. It should be what most people think, and yet because they're famous, people will follow after them and believe what they say and swallow it, hook, line, and sinker. Now, interesting watching or reading through the rest of this article. There's an NGO, a non-government organization that monitors illegal construction in Judea and Samaria, and it's fully documented the history of this region of Israel. The area was designated as Idea Firing Zone 918, covering an area of some 33,000 dunams in early 1980s by military designation order offered on June 8th of 1980. As early as 1993, the Israeli Air Force conducted attack training in the area. These were full-scale military exercises of the kind that made permanent residence impossible. And this fact alone proves there's no permanent settlement ever existed there. And during this period, the civil administration carried out active law enforcement procedures, removing illegal structures that were built in violation of the military designation order. And at the same time, Arab farmers and shepherds were given access to the firing zone during lulls in the training schedule, generally over the weekends and on Jewish and Israeli holidays. And the government went so far as to agree not to use the zone for live training during two specific periods annually to allow seasonal planting and harvesting of crops and grazing of livestock. In 1999, Palestinians filed a petition with the court but have never provided any proof of ownership. Despite being rebuked by the judge on this point, Palestinians continued to build. And a Palestinian propaganda film ignores the facts, disregards years of legal consideration, and makes no attempt to present another side of the specialist narrative of displacement and occupation. And again, sadly, there are so many Christians who have jumped on this bandwagon, forgetting that it's the God of the Bible that gave Israel this land. It doesn't matter. And certainly, let me be clear, Palestinians, the modern day Palestinians, weren't out there first. They have no history. I mean, just asking some simple questions would eliminate any of these arguments. Well, let's go back to the late 1800s. And who were the Palestinian authors? What was their uh, uh, coinage? What kind of currency did they have? What was their literature like? Who were their authors? What was their architectural form? And all of these answers are non-existent because there was no such thing. And early in the 20th century, when any type of literature, news or documentation mentioned Palestinians, they were referring to the Jews who lived in this area. And so again, facts don't matter these days. It's all about feelings and emotions and cultural sensitivities. Now, I think just kind of understanding that there's a shared ideology with Hamas and the Iranians and others who exhibit these behaviors that we find to be so heinous. And the Times of Israel reports on a story where an Iranian singer was whipped 74 times for a song that called for the removal of women's headscarves. A prominent Iranian pop singer who made a song urging women to remove their headscarves said Wednesday that he was willing to pay a price for freedom after being flogged 74 times by the authorities as part of his sentence. Mehdi Yarahi, arrested in 2023, was released last year after being convicted for his song in support of the song titled Woman, Life, Freedom. Protests erupted in 2022 that rocked Iran's clerical leadership. And today, the final part of the verdict issued by the Revolutionary Court, 74 lashes, was fully completed and completely implemented at Branch 4 of the Office for Enforcement of Judgments of the Tehran Moral Security Prosecutor. His lawyer, Zahra Manoui, wrote on X. The case was closed, she added. In a defiant subsequent post, Yarari added, the person who is not willing to pay a price for freedom is not worthy of freedom. And Yarari was arrested in August of 2023 for releasing what the authorities termed as an illegal song, and namely the track Rosarito, Your Headscarf in Persian, and voiced support for women's right to remove the garment that must be worn in public in the Islamic Republic. The implementation of his sentence sparked uproar among supporters. A Nobel Prize laureate, Narges Mohammadi, on temporary release from a prison sentence, said in the statement, flogging was retaliation for Rahari's support of women in Iran. And the lashes on Mehdi's body are a whip against the proud and resilient women of Iran and the thriving, powerful spirit of woman life freedom movement. Iran's Sharia law provides for flogging sentences that are frequently handed out by judges, though far from always implemented. The death in custody on September 16, 2022, of Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old Iranian Kurd arrested for allegedly violating Iran's strict dress rules for women, sparked months of protests and included calls for an end to Iran's Islamic regime. Can you imagine a culture, a regime that killed a woman for showing portions of her hair? And this is what we're talking about. And yet, I bet if you mention the name, uh, um, the young gal's name, Masa Amini, to any of the women's rights activists here in the United States, and have no clue who you were talking about. There's no outrage, nothing coming from all those who are screaming for women's rights today, and no one making a statement about this vile regime that killed a young girl for showing her hair while she was in custody. And now they've issued this serve, carried out 74 lashes on the back of a man who was standing up for women's rights. And I'm glad that the article said that he was willing to take that stand after he was beaten. It's one thing to say it beforehand, quite another to say it after. So, our next door neighbors have a sticker with Masa Amini's name on it and a sticker that says Free Iran. It impacted the Iranian community here in the United States very significantly. And so they're all hoping for the end of this regime because of its, just heinous beliefs and tactics. Now, the U.S. Sun says we are prepared for war with China, according to Trump Defense Secretary, after a Xi threat as the tariff scrap escalates dramatically. And U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth declared that the U.S. is prepared for war with China in response to Beijing's chilling World War III threat. President Trump's fresh 25% tariffs on imports from Canada and Mexico took effect on Tuesday, along with double duties on Chinese goods, sparking devastating trade war. Trump doubled the tariff on all Chinese imports from 10% to an eye-watering 20%, prompting a chilling warning from Xi Jinping's nation. And China's Foreign Affairs Ministry said, if war is what the U.S. wants, be it a tariff war, trade war, any other type of war, we're ready to fight to the end. And Hegseth slammed Beijing's threat, warning, we're prepared to stress the importance for the U.S. to be strong as the tariff scrap continues to dramatically escalate, the defense secretary said on an interview on Fox. Those who long for peace must prepare for war. And that's why we're rebuilding our military. That's why we're reestablishing deterrence in the warrior ethos. We live in a dangerous world with powerful ascendant countries with very different ideology. Making a nod to Beijing's threat, Hegseth added that other nations are rapidly increasing their defense spending, modern technology, and they want to supplant the United States. If we want to deter war with the Chinese or others, we have to be strong. And, this is one of the things that previous administrations in recent years just didn't seem to get through their heads, that everybody doesn't think like we do. And there are countries that hate us, and diplomacy doesn't work with somebody who sees violence as a mean to advance their ideology or cause, and especially those who think death is a guarantee to arrive in paradise. And the only way to be assured that your arrival in paradise and the bizarre rewards that they say await them are going to be there. And it's always been kind of a strange thing to me. I think probably most of you have heard about the fact that, 72 virgins await the martyrs and those who give their life for Islam. And yet, there's restrictions against some of these very things that when you arrive in what they call paradise, you're rewarded with. Now, why would God reward you with Allah? Why would Allah reward you with things of paradise that he forbade on the earth? It just doesn't make sense. But again, mothers are raising their children to be martyrs in these areas of the world, many of them. And, I think it's interesting to, if you go back to any video prior to 1979, and in many countries in the Middle East, Iran included, Afghan as well, Afghanistan, I should say as well, then what you're going to see is very Turkey, certainly. Turkey, actually, much later than 1979, all the way up into the early 2000s. You had a very westernized looking culture. And many in the video footages that you can see online on YouTube, it looks like Los Angeles or New York City or one of the big cities in some type of Western culture oriented city. And nothing like that today. As a matter of fact, we were on a tour in 2012 in Turkey. And, we didn't just go to Ephesus. We went to Izmir. We went to Smyrna. And we went to Istanbul and several other cities and had a wonderful tour, had a wonderful guide. And we were driving along on the bus and he signaled our attention to two women in full burqas walking down the street. And he said, the winds of change have arrived in Turkey because you never used to see that here. And now here we've got this radical extremist regime has taken over Turkey, and all this in preparation for the Ezekiel War, which is on the not too distant horizon as well. Now, speaking of traitors, I think this is an interesting story. ABC News says Supreme Court rules Trump administration must unfreeze foreign aid payments. A sharply divided Supreme Court on Wednesday ruled that the Trump administration must comply with a district court order to pay out nearly $2 billion in foreign assistance funds to nonprofit aid groups for work already completed on the government's behalf. The court ruled 5-4 with Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Amy Coney Barrett siding with the liberal justices. Barrett, the Trump appointee. The court did not elaborate on the decision, but said the district court judge should clarify what obligations the government must fulfill to ensure compliance with the temporary restraining order, with due regard for the feasibility of any compliance timelines. Justice Samuel Alito said in his dissent that he was stunned by the majority's decision. Does a single district court judge, who likely lacks jurisdiction, have the unchecked power to compel the government of the United States to pay out and probably lose forever $2 billion taxpayer dollars? The answer to that question should be an emphatic no. But a majority of this court apparently thinks otherwise, he wrote. Trump did not, the administration that is, did not immediately respond to the ruling, but the court's majority, did not specify a deadline by which the administration needed to comply. The administration initially tried to freeze the payments via an executive order before the U.S. District Court Judge Amir Ali ordered the payments to resume in a temporary restraining order issued 3 weeks ago. And last week, Ali, a Biden appointee, ruled the administration violated the terms of the temporary restraining order and ordered the Trump administration to dole out delayed payments by 11:59 p.m. February 26th. So again, here you've got the Supreme Court, and there is a bit of a component to this, and I think we all would resonate with. The work was completed, and that's what they're saying had to be paid. But at the same time, some of the stories we've been hearing, what was that money for? What work were they doing? Was it work that benefited Hamas? Was it work that benefited our enemies? I think this is the real question. And, of course, someone, who's been terminated should be paid for the work that they've already done. But the whole reason that the USAID was cut off and shut down was because of what they were doing. They were doing anti-American, anti-Israel things, promoting our enemies, financing those who hate us, and these other things. And that's why Doge identified them, and the government shut them down. So, you know, I mean, do you pay a drug dealer who's arrested and didn't collect the money for the drugs he just sold? I mean, come on, it doesn't even make any sense. But sadly, to see, the Supreme Court move in a liberal direction the way that it has, a vote in this way is a sad commentary on the state of our country and these activist judges, including Ali and others, who have just fallen prey to what's happening in our world. Jesus is coming soon. Let's always keep that in mind. The Jewish News reports AI could make new runways obsolete. This broad article, but this is a specific application to something we know that's going to play a major role during the tribulation. And as Heathrow's controversial third runway gets a green light, and Gatwick looks on track for a second one, an Israeli tech innovation could reduce the need for such costly expansions. Intellect is a cutting-edge AI company that helps airports maximize efficiency, cut delays, and save billions of pounds by optimizing ground operations and reducing aircraft turnaround times. It could spare airports the need for new runways entirely. The aviation industry is bleeding from 1,000 cuts, said Uday Segal, Intellect's founder and CEO. Cost and delays, with an average of 15.5 minutes per flight, add up to billions in cost. We saw a financial opportunity in how airlines manage their activities, and that's where Intellect comes in. Intellect leverages big data and machine learning to provide airlines, airports, and ground handling teams with real-time visibility into service performance bottlenecks and the ability to address them in a way that can yield significant operational improvements and a dramatic reduction in flight delays. In February, the UK government backed expansion plans for a controversial third runway at Heathrow, and a decision is expected any day on whether Gatwick in West Sussex can expand its operations to two simultaneously functioning runways. If given the green light, Gatwick says the additional runway will enable 50,000 departing flights a year by the end of the 2030s. While the investments in Heathrow and Gatwick are significant milestones, expansion for many airports isn't an option, whether due to space constraints or environmental regulations or cost barriers. This is where optimizing runway use with AI becomes critical, said Segal. Lost runway capacity, often caused by inaccurate or late departures or target off block time reporting, can result in significant annual losses for airports. And who are they leaning on to resolve this problem? AI. And it's interesting to see and consider some of the things that are going to be laid out in the future. We know in Revelation 13, there's an image built that apparently appears to have life breathed into it. And so AI, and there's another article I didn't include it in tonight's program, but McDonald's is incorporating AI into some of its problem areas, the constant breaking down of this machine or that machine and causing, customer delays and wrong orders and all the other things. And of course, we all hear about, I can't think of what the name of it is, but they've got an ice cream machine there at McDonald's, and I forget what they call the product. I don't eat there, but anyway, I've heard all kinds of gripes about, the ice cream machine breaking down and this AI. This was one of the elements of the article that I read that says, they'll be able to predict when a problem is going to pop up with that machine and replace it before it breaks down and keep the cash flowing and keep the customer happy and all that. But AI definitely has a part in what's coming, and it's here. And that too ought to tell us of the lateness of the hour and the fact that the Lord is coming for us soon. Now, the president has, in this recent election, I think probably has deepened and exposed more than ever before the polarization that's happening in our world and some of the things that this administration has jumped on immediately, things that it should. Well, first of all, they should have never happened, but the administration is doing the right thing regarding many of these issues. And this article comes from Fox News, and it says Target faces a 40-day boycott for rolling back DEI initiatives. The organizers are calling the boycott a Target fast. NAACP urges Black Americans to avoid companies that ditch DEI. And the Big Money Show panel discusses the rollback of diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's what DEI stands for. Policies at big companies like Amazon, Target, and Walmart. And Target is reportedly getting hit with a 40-day boycott, say some consumers. An Atlanta-based Reverend Jamal Bryant has urged customers, or consumers rather, to avoid spending money at the retailer for the entirety of Lent, the New York Post reported. Lent began Wednesday and will run through April 17th, and the 40-day boycott is in response to a recent move by Target to scale back its diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, according to the outlet. The retailer said in late January that it was altering its DEI efforts, including stopping external diversity-focused surveys and renaming its supplier diversity team the Supplier Engagement, Fox Business reported. At the time, the company also said it was concluding its 3-year DEI goals and ending its racial equity action and change REACH initiatives in 2025 as planned. We remain focused on driving our business by creating a sense of belonging for our team, guests, and communities through a commitment to inclusion. Target Chief Community Impact and Equity Officer Kiara Fernandez sent in a message to employees at the time. Belonging for all is an essential part of our team and culture, helping fuel consumer relevance and business results. And again, some of the things that we're seeing happening in our world and country today. And, one of the most bizarre things that I think that we've been hearing is that this administration is trying to destroy our democracy. And, it just is a glaring revelation of the massive ignorance of people in our country today. And I say that for this reason, for two, really. First of all, we are not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic. And through the constitutional republic and the electoral college, every state has a voice. And therefore, population centers like California, Florida, Texas, and New York aren't in control of who runs the country, so to speak. Every state has a voice. Now, the other thing I think that just exposes, I guess, the massive ignorance today is the definition of democracy. And democracy means majority rules. And by majority, I mean a simple majority. If there's 51 to 49, the 51 rule. And, all these people are talking about the fact that our democracy is being destroyed. Well, the truth of the matter is, if you want a democracy, the majority of people are against this DEI movement. And it's a very small portion of culture and society, which, by the way, is illegal, that is being helped by this. And you cannot, under our Constitution, you cannot limit access to certain things based on someone's racial status or religious beliefs or any of those things, or just generally. And you cannot use our tax dollars in that way. And again, so just listening to people talk today just shows how little they know about our actual history and the meaning of even the things that they're touting. Have been multiple um, clips. I think many of you probably seen them, where there's a man on the street who's asking someone about, "Hey, are you chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine must be free?" And asking them what river, and they don't know, and what sea, they don't know. They don't know what they're doing. Behind this chant is calling for the destruction of Israel, the elimination of the Jewish people, or genocide, if you will, which Israel is often accused of. So once again, we live in the times that the Bible predicted, and just things are upside down and backwards. And One of the things I think that's interesting in the book of Isaiah, the prophet starts off with basically the end of the story. He starts off talking about the millennium. He starts off talking about the last days. And in chapter 2, you'll find, the mention of when the Lord arises to shake the earth. That's tribulation. And one of the things he mentions is that the Lord will give peoples children for their princes. Now, I don't believe that's to be taken literally. I believe and what's implied there is that in the last days, unqualified and incompetent leadership will be the order of the day. We see that all over the world today. And that's what I believe the children, as princes and rulers, indicates that there will be people who are basically clueless about facts and reality, who are in places of great power. And that again ought to remind us Jesus is coming for us soon. Well, that's it for this week. And again, thank you so much for joining us. And all these things, and I love what many of you probably heard, we've all repeated it I think prophecy teachers repeated it, in a phrase coined by Dr. Ed Heinzen, a dear brother and friend in the Lord who's now with the Lord. He said, prophecy is not meant to scare you. It's meant to prepare you. And, again, this falls right in line with what Paul was telling the church at Thessaloniki. This day is not going to overtake us as a thief, so we shouldn't be scared. And he told Timothy in 2 Timothy 1:7, God hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but a power, love, and a sound mind. So, we have no reason to fear. Jesus is coming soon. Soon we'll be going home. And so, as has been said by many over the years, the only thing you can take to heaven with you is people. Let's tell people about Jesus. For time is running out, and there's going to be a transition here very soon, I believe, where we are going to be removed. We'll meet the dead in Christ in the air and forever be with the Lord. By the way, the dead in Christ speaks of a bodily resurrection, where they're going to put on a glorified body. That's what Philippians 3:20 is talking about. These lowly bodies will put on. We've actually been predestined to put on a Christ-like body and a glorified body, and that will allow us to. And with that body comes a glorified mind. That's what John was talking about, 1 John 3:2. When we see him, we'll be like him, for we'll see him as he is. So we'll think right, we'll do right, and we'll live forever and ever. And we'll rule and reign with him on the earth, and then we'll reign with him forever in the New Jerusalem when that day comes. So much to look forward to, exciting times. And again, thank you for joining us this evening. Hey, please hit the subscribe button. That'd be really helpful. And, I happened to see this comment last week, and, I would go through the comments sometimes. And I love to see what encourage people and what bless people and where people are from too. And somebody made the comment, why are there so few likes with so many viewers? And so hit the like button too on this video, because that's what exposes it to other people. And really, that's kind of the hope of this, the mere same kind of thing. We want people to subscribe. We want people to like these broadcasts, because that's how they get exposed to other people, especially non-believers. When something has got a lot of likes on it, then it's higher in the recommendation stream on YouTube or any other social media platform. So that's a great help. And it's not about, you just want a lot of likes or whatever. That's not what it's about. We want people to know. We want people to know that Jesus is coming and how to miss the whole tribulation thing. So again, with that said, that's it for this week. Thank you again for joining us. Love you. May the Lord bless and keep you. And we'll see you here, there, or in the air. God bless.